From the humble beginnings of Iron Man to the epic team-up in the Avengers, Phase 1 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe laid the foundation for the biggest franchise in cinema history. Join me as I explore how 6 groundbreaking films introduced Earth's mightiest heroes and forever changed the landscape of superhero storytelling. This somewhat in-depth look at Phase 1 reveals how Marvel Studios turned relatively unknown characters into household names and proved that a shared cinematic universe wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Hello and welcome back to the watch list. Today I've decided to do a collection of the Marvel movies I've reviewed. Seeing as I've reviewed all of Phase 1, I thought why not merge them all into one video, basically reviewing the entirety of Phase 1. So that's what I've done. Also, another thing to note is that the audio quality may change throughout the video, as I've been experimenting different recording environments throughout making these videos, so they may sound different. Other than that, kick back, relax, and let's get into it. Back in 2008, when it first hit our screens, Iron Man wasn't a really majorly loved comic book superhero, unlike say Spider-Man or Wolverine. As most of you already know, Marvel had been bankrupt back in the 90s as to why they sold most of their very popular characters, some being Spider-Man, Fantastic Four and the X-Men. Well, with the little amount of money they had left, they took a gamble on creating the movie Iron Man, a B-list superhero portrayed by an actor with a troubled past, and not only that, they set their sights on creating an entire connected universe, and boy did that pay off. Join me as I dive into Iron Man, the movie that kickstarted the Marvel Cinematic Universe and redefined superhero cinema. The movie is incredibly well structured and well written. I find that the story is great for the initial entry to the cinematic universe, as it introduces things such as the 10 Rings and the Stark weapons industry, all of which is still finding its way into the latest phases with movies like Shang-Chi and Armor Wars if they're still making that. So they clearly knew what they were doing early on in the game. They had foundations set and they went with it. In fact, this movie actually had 4 writers. These were Mark Fergus, Hawk Otsby, Art Markham and Matt Holloway. From researching this movie, I've actually found some stories about the writing process. According to Jeff Bridges, Obadiah Stane, the writing for the film was actually happening as they were filming scenes, so the actors practically had no script for the movie at times. This was because the writers were hired as filming began. Considering that, they did a great job. I mean, I somewhat enjoyed the plot, but to get each character right and to keep those personalities going for 10 years? It's an amazing achievement. The director of Iron Man was no other than Happy Hogan himself, otherwise known as Jon Favreau. A great director and actor. I recently watched a video on how he wrote and starred in one of his first movies, Swingers, and how he barely had any money to even produce it. It then went on to make $4.6 million at the domestic box office, which was a massive accomplishment. Now let's talk about the action pieces in the movie. A lot of it was very practical, especially the flying scenes. They look notably amazing compared to the more recent films like Captain Marvel. When she's flying, you can really tell it's all just CG. I read an article with Jon Favreau where he compared the shots with Top Gun, and he wondered how they managed to film those scenes back when CGI didn't really exist. And I respect them for taking the time to think about it and make it look as realistic as they could. The fighting scenes looked and sounded amazing, especially the repulsors. There was just something about the first time he uses it that hits hard. It's iconic and very intimidating. Mix that with the amazing suit and the soundtrack for the movie, featuring AC/DC and Black Sabbath, it makes for a fascinating watch. The suit was half practical, half CG. This is where I think the peak of superhero costumes was at for me. Now we have mostly CGI suits and they feel off compared to this. Making it practical really harmonised with this movie, especially as he's in the initial stage of building the Iron Man suit, so it's going to be this chunky, heavy piece of equipment. I should really shout out the VFX artists in this movie. They did an amazing job making everything look incredible. Keep in mind this was in 2008, it could have been terrible. The VFX supervisor for Iron Man was John Nelson. He also had the task of finding a way to make Iron Man's heads-up display, or HUD, look the most realistic and easy to shoot. Again, it became something iconic. There was also something fascinating about how they dealt with the technology that Tony Stark uses. The holograms were way ahead of its time, and the way he used them just looks unreal. You know the scene where he puts his hand in the holographic repulsor and it's like he's wearing the real thing? That felt revolutionary at the time. This also paved the way for how they portrayed the technology in the MCU. Even in Black Panther, Shuri uses more advanced tech, and you can see the similarities. Now, of course I'm going to have to talk about Robert Downey Jr.'s impact on this film. At the time, it was a huge gamble to even cast him, as 5 years prior to this, in 2003, he had only just become sober after years of drug abuse and multiple trips to prison. It's clear to see now that he has turned his life around. Apparently the whole reason Jon Favreau settled on him was because of Robert Downey Jr.'s past, as he felt that it ran parallel with Tony Stark's story in the comics. It's still surprising to me that the studio even went ahead with it. Clearly it was the right decision. Although they did have a few other choices before they finally set on Robert Downey Jr. Actors such as Hugh Jackman, Tom Cruise, Timothy Olyphant, Leonardo DiCaprio, and funnily enough Sam Rockwell, who went on to play Justin Hammer in Iron Man 2. Robert Downey Jr. plays the role excellently and captures his portrayal of Tony Stark incredibly well. Tony here is just as egotistical and self-centered as he is in the comics. This speaks not only to the way Robert Downey Jr. depicts Iron Man, but from the writing as well. Of course, we get an iteration of Pepper Potts in the movie, played by Gwyneth Paltrow. I've never really enjoyed Gwyneth's portrayal of Pepper, she always felt so flat. I do however like the banter between her and Tony. It's amusing to watch them argue and bicker, but in terms of a relationship, I don't think they suit each other. There wasn't really a chemistry between them. Talking about chemistry though, we do get Happy Hogan. Like I said earlier, he's played by Jon Favreau, and he does an amazing job. The friendship between him and Tony is real, and you can feel it here. He's a funny character, and it's mostly just his mannerisms and the way he responds to Tony that makes him entertaining to watch. We get Rhodey in this movie. He's played by Terrence Howard, who's famously the first person to be cast in the MCU, although he gets replaced by Don Cheadle in the future movies. This was because Marvel wanted to dock his pay, but Terrence wanted to get what he was contracted for. Although looking into this, he was paid $4.5 million for his small role in Iron Man. Yet Robert Downey Jr. was paid $2 million for his protagonist role in the film. This makes sense as to why Marvel felt the need to dock his pay and increase Robert Downey Jr.'s in the sequel. However, it caused tension between Terrence and Downey, as Downey was getting paid $10 million for the sequel, and Marvel wanted to give $8 million to Terrence. Terrence's performance wasn't bad. I felt like he resembles Rhodey from the comics more than Don Cheadle. He looks more like he's from a military background, and I did like the friendship between him and Tony. But it's quite forgettable other than the connection between Tony and Rhodey in the second movie. In the cave where Tony Stark is captured, we see a man called Ho Jensen, played by Sean Tubb, who captures his role so casually and pulls it off incredibly well. What's strange is that I barely see anyone mentioning Jensen, and yet he's one of the most pivotal players in this movie. He helped Tony create the suit and sacrificed himself to help Tony escape. He was a legend. Due to this, Stark started to learn from what Jensen taught him, and it made him more of the selfless hero we get in future movies. For the villain of the movie, we get Obadiah Stane, also known as the Ironmonger. He's a business rival of Tony. He tries to disguise himself as a friend of Tony's early on. It later turns out that Obadiah was the person who sent the Ten Rings organization after Tony, to then take over the Stark Industries company. He's portrayed by Jeffrey Bridges, who does a very clever job of coming across as an aggressive psychopath. His portrayal is very memorable, especially this scene.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
Like I said earlier, there's a couple of appearances in this that pave the way for upcoming Marvel projects and characters. Agent Coulson gets a brief debut. Having someone who works for S.H.I.E.L.D. play a role in this was actually massive, especially for the future of the MCU. It opened up so many avenues for them, as they could then incorporate S.H.I.E.L.D. into other movies like Thor and Captain America, allowing them to piece this whole tapestry together very early on. There's a brief cameo in the post-credit scene of Samuel L. Jackson's character, Nick Fury, coming to Tony and talking about the Avengers initiative. Being huge at the time, it went on to be a continuous ritual for a Marvel movie to do. The Ten Rings have an appearance in this too. It's quite clever how they added it but didn't really utilise it until later on. I know they thought about using the Mandarin in the first movie, but Jon Favreau said that the character was a bit difficult to get right at the time. Now the biggest thing here is how this was the first brushstroke on the canvas that is the MCU. It created so many new and exciting adventures and stories. I think my favourite part is that it's a rush job. They decided to just do this on a whim with characters they had left in their arsenal, and that's why I love this movie. Okay, let's jump into some trivia for the movie. Some of you might already know these, but some of these are quite interesting, such as Robert Downey Jr. improvised the line "I am Iron Man." Paul Bettany, the voice of the Jarvis AI, has said that he hasn't even watched the movie and that this was the easiest role ever. He says it was like a robbery since he only worked for 2 hours and got paid a lot of money. The car Tony was working on in the first act of the film is actually owned by Jon Favreau. The Iron Man 1966 theme song can be heard on occasion. And Stan Lee makes a brief appearance as he plays the role of Hugh Hefner and is said to be his favourite of his many cameos. Okay, I'm going to do a rating segment with this series and rank all the MCU movies I review. So with this one, it has to be up there in the S tier, and I think a lot of people will be with me on that. The movie's success can be attributed to several factors. I mean, Robert Downey Jr.'s charismatic portrayal of Tony Stark, which set the tone for the entire MCU. Jon Favreau's skilled direction as he balances action, humour and the character development. It has impressive visual effects that still hold up today, particularly the practical effects used for the Iron Man suit. It had a well-structured story that laid the groundwork for future MCU installments, and the strong supporting performances that brought the depth to the world of Tony Stark. Despite the challenges in the writing process, the movie managed to deliver a coherent and engaging narrative. Iron Man not only revitalized Marvel as a brand, but also redefined what audiences could expect from superhero movies. It set a new standard for character development, visual effects, and interconnected storytelling in the genre, proving that with the right combination of talent, vision, and a bit of risk-taking, even a B-list superhero can become a cultural icon. The Incredible Hulk had a unique challenge from the start. Unlike Iron Man, which introduced a relatively unknown superhero, the Hulk was already a household name. The character had seen various adaptations, including a popular TV series in the 70s, starring Lou Ferrigno, and a 2003 film directed by Ang Lee, starring Eric Bana. Marvel's task was to reinvent the character for a new cinematic universe, while making it different from these previous iterations. And this would prove to be one of the film's greatest challenges. The movie's structure deviates from the typical origin story, instead opting for a fugitive narrative that picks up with Banner already transformed into the Hulk. This choice allows the film to hit the ground running, giving us action and tension from the get-go. The script, written by Zach Penn, weaves together elements of the comic books, the TV series, and original ideas to create a unique take on the Hulk. Unlike Iron Man, the script for The Incredible Hulk had already been written, before Norton was even cast in the role. The original script seemed to lean into the fact that Mark Ruffalo was going to be playing the role, which is what both Louis Leterrier and Kevin Feige wanted. I'll get into that a bit more later. The script had more dialogue for the Hulk and longer fight scenes between him and the Abomination. This sounds great. I think we would have gotten sequels to this if it ever happened. But both Universal and former brain-dead Marvel chairman Ike Perlmutter thought that the role should be given to someone more famous at the time. Edward Norton has been known to make himself very present at productions for movies, more in terms of wanting to direct and write the movie himself. I know that there's a few things he changed about the script for this film. The writer for the movie, Zach Penn, stated in the book The Reign of Marvel Studios that Norton would change very trivial things. He goes on to say, "I had him walking east down the street wearing a blue hat, and now he's walking west down the street wearing a red hat." That's insane to think that he changed small things like that just to seem in control of the project. Kevin Feige especially didn't find working with Norton a delight. In fact, he had this statement to say after they fired Norton and cast Mark Ruffalo for the Avengers. "We have made the decision to not bring Ed Norton back to portray the title role of Bruce Banner in the Avengers. Our decision is definitely not one based on monetary factors. but instead rooted in the need for an actor who embodies the creativity and collaborative spirit of our other talented cast members. The Avengers demands players who thrive working as part of an ensemble, as evidenced by Robert Downey Jr., Chris Hemsworth, Chris Evans, Sam Jackson, Scarlett Johansson, and all of our talented casts. He gives a proper dig at Norton there, which is hilarious. I'm sorry, but if you're cast in a main role in a movie, it doesn't give you the right to have a massive ego boost and play pretend at being a director or a producer. It just doesn't work like that. The movie was directed by Louis Leterrier, known for his work on action films like the Transporter series, and most recently the movie Fast X. The Incredible Hulk leans heavily into its action sequences. This focus on spectacle sometimes comes at the expense of character development, but it does deliver on the promise of seeing the Hulk in all his destructive glory. The action scenes in The Incredible Hulk are a significant step up from the 2003 film. The CGI, while not perfect by today's standards, was impressive for its time. The Hulk himself is more detailed and expressive, capturing the power and anger of the character. The climatic battle between Hulk and the Abomination in Harlem is particularly memorable. It shows the destructive capabilities of the two colossal characters. I'd love to see the Hulk battle it out between someone like the Abomination again at some point. However, the film's visual style is notably darker and grittier than Iron Man, setting a different tone that didn't quite align with the direction that the MCU would ultimately take. This tonal dissonance might be one reason why the film feels somewhat disconnected from the rest of the franchise. The way the Hulk was depicted here was both terrifying and captivating. Obviously, they decided not to follow the same tone in the later MCU projects as this movie did. But I really enjoyed this portrayal of the character. It felt very grounded and original. The fact that they are testing the water with different genres in the newer phases of the MCU, such as WandaVision and Werewolf by Night, suggests that they could depict Hulk in a similar manner again, possibly in a World War Hulk scenario. Edward Norton's portrayal of Bruce Banner is compelling. He brings a quiet intensity to the role whilst conveying Banner's internal struggle and his desperation to rid himself of the Hulk. However, I do believe that he also gave a very dry depiction of Bruce. It felt very stale. I understand that the character is supposed to be this awkward, self-conscious guy, but Mark Ruffalo could also do this whilst making the character feel vibrant. Maybe it's safe to say that Norton is more suited to act in dramas and thrillers rather than comic book movies. Some choices for Bruce Banner before Edward Norton took the role were David Duchovny, who's best known for his work in The X-Files. The director Louis Leterrier and Kevin Feige's original choice for the role was in fact Mark Ruffalo, way back before he was even cast in The Avengers. Talk about foreshadowing. I mean, I guess it's not really foreshadowing, it's more like Marvel Jesus Kevin Feige already having some sort of prophecy of what the MCU should be from the get-go. Liv Tyler's Betty Ross provides a strong emotional anchor for Banner, though her character doesn't get as much development as I would have hoped. Her boyfriend is an okay addition to the movie, played by Ty Burrell, however he wasn't utilised very well. It's also funny to think that Phil Dunphy is walking around the MCU. We get the late William Hurt as he portrays General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. He brings a gravitas to the film, creating a complex antagonist whose motivations are understandable if misguided. He's later more developed in movies like Civil War, and will be dived into much more in the upcoming Captain America film, this time played by Harrison Ford. We see Tim Roth as he portrays Emil Blonsky / Abomination. It's a standout performance. Roth brings a manic energy to Blonsky's character, effectively portraying this descent from decorated soldier to power-hungry monster. His transformation into the Abomination provides a worthy physical challenge for the Hulk. When you see him turn, it's actually quite gut-wrenching. Watching his bones snap and contort like that, it really showed you what kind of tone they were going for. The character still stands as a core villain for the MCU, as we see him return in Shang-Chi, and more importantly in She-Hulk, where we see that Blonsky's character has developed since the iteration in The Incredible Hulk. While The Incredible Hulk might feel disconnected from the broader MCU, it does lay some important groundwork. The post-credit scene featuring Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr. hints at the formation of the Avengers, directly tying the film to the larger narrative. The introduction of General Ross would prove significant, with the character reappearing in the later MCU films. Another person who's rumoured to be reappearing from this movie is the leader, Samuel Stearns, played by Tim Blake Nelson. We don't actually see him represented as the leader in the film, but we get a brief shot of him changing after Bruce Banner's blood spills into an open wound on his head. We've heard nothing of this character since, so it's interesting to assume where he's been the whole time. We might even get a cameo in the upcoming Captain America Brave New World, as it seems like the right timing, as that movie will also introduce the Red Hulk. The film also introduces the super soldier serum concept, which would become a reoccurring element in the MCU, playing crucial roles in films like Captain America the First Avenger and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series. Okay, now it's time for some interesting trivia on the movie. Liv Tyler actually signed on without reading the script. Sam Elliott wanted to reprise the role of Thunderbolt Ross from the Hulk 2003. We get a scene in a pizzeria owned by a character called Stanley Lieber, which is in fact Stan Lee's birth name. I never knew that. The man who portrayed him is called Paul Soles, who provided the voice for Bruce Banner and the Hulk in the 1966 series. Also, he later voiced Peter Parker and Spider-Man in the 1967 series. Lou Ferrigno, who played the Hulk in the 1977 series, plays a security guard in the movie. He also plays a security guard in the Hulk 2003. Stan Lee's cameo in this is him drinking a bottle that had been contaminated with Bruce Banner's blood. I'm not sure what the relevance of this scene was, but it was good to see him appear. Okay, continuing my MCU ranking, I think The Incredible Hulk sits comfortably in the B tier. While it may not reach the heights of Iron Man, it's a solid superhero film that delivers on action and spectacle. Its contributions to the larger MCU narrative, though subtle, are significant. In conclusion, The Incredible Hulk, while often overlooked, played a crucial role in the early days of the MCU. Its strengths lie in its action sequences, the performances of its cast, and its contributions to the larger Marvel universe. However, its tonal inconsistency with the rest of the MCU and behind-the-scenes conflicts have led it to being somewhat sidelined in the franchise's history. Despite its flaws, The Incredible Hulk remains an important piece of the MCU puzzle. The Incredible Hulk deserves recognition for its role in shaping the franchise we know and love today. Iron Man 2 was the first ever sequel in the Marvel Universe. It tackled bigger issues within Tony Stark's personal life, which results in affecting his superhero persona. The movie also introduces more characters into the universe, such as Black Widow and Nick Fury, expanding on the lore and preparing us for the eventual team-up film. Join me as I delve into the movie that was highly anticipated, but lacked the unique qualities of its predecessor. Iron Man 2 had a more complex narrative, introducing key elements that would shape the MCU, such as S.H.I.E.L.D's larger role and the introduction of Natasha Romanoff, played by Scarlett Johansson. The production faced challenges with balancing character development and setting up future storylines, but it managed to maintain the charm and wit that fans loved. The sequel is again directed by Jon Favreau, although it was the last time that Favreau would direct a Marvel movie. I did some research on the subject and he spoke about how the production of the movie felt too robotic after Disney acquired Marvel. A summary of what he says is that the first Iron Man film felt like an indie movie, whereas the second was made right after Disney bought the rights to Marvel. They had to do long hours as they only had 2 years to storyboard, film and edit it. There had to be a schedule and a timeline of how scenes were shot, so there was no longer any room for improvisation and the cast weren't having as much of an enjoyable experience as they were last time. You can see now that this may have been a factor into why some characters such as Ivan Vanko, Whiplash, felt rushed. Considering that, the film was produced incredibly well and managed to keep that early Marvel nostalgia. It does go to show that rushing media like this causes it to have severe impacts on cast members and the production crew. A very similar thing has been going on currently because of the greedy fat cats at Disney, but it's good to know that they're pushing it all back a bit and giving their employees time to produce better quality work. The movie was written by Justin Theroux, who also wrote Tropic Thunder. Only one writer this time around, unlike the first Iron Man movie that had 4 writers. This time the writing process wasn't as premature. The script was written before the filming of the movie, which meant for less improv written into the scenes, which I think might have been what made the movie feel less casual and autonomous. The action sequences in Iron Man 2 were a spectacle, with improved special effects and more elaborate set pieces. The Monaco racing scene stands out as a highlight. It showcases Tony Stark's ingenuity with a brand new way of him equipping the Iron Man armor via a suitcase. The way he uses it and how it mechanically forms around his body is still incredible today. I much more prefer this to any nanosuit tech that we've been getting recently. Surprisingly, this wasn't the only upgrade Tony was packing. With the help of his father's old designs and newer technology, he discovers a brand new element. I'll expand on this a bit more in the connection segment of the video because this element interweaves with other Marvel projects. Because of this discovery, he integrates it with his arc reactor, creating this sustainable and fancy new look. I do like the look of this chest armor, but I do also feel like the character suits the circular reactor. The armor for Rhodey looked epic, his minigun was incredibly well utilized in the final fight scene. Some of those action pieces were very entertaining to watch. Whilst we're talking about the final act, we may as well get into it. The costume for Whiplash was okay. I don't like how it basically just copied Iron Man's suit. I would have preferred if he kept the makeshift look he had in the racecourse scene. Something about it being built in a hurry and out of scraps really gave some definition to the character. His death scene was apparently left ambiguous because Marvel wasn't sure if they were going to return to his character, but to me it looked like he got absolutely obliterated. The teamwork between Rhodey and Tony was fun to see, especially the way they both used repulsors against each other's, creating a massive energy bomb, being a callback to what they did in Tony's Malibu house. I haven't mentioned him yet, but Justin Hammer is also an antagonist in this film, played by Sam Rockwell, a frontrunner for the Iron Man role, which I mentioned in my review for Iron Man. Anyway, Rockwell's performance in this was fun to watch. He brings a vibrancy to the character, even though he's a diabolical business rival of Tony. His intentions are to bring an army of Iron Man-esque battle droids to eclipse Stark Industries and be at the top of the weapons market. The droids were created by Ivan Vanko, as Justin Hammer hired him to compete with Tony's creations, although Ivan's goal was to use them to kill Tony and destroy his legacy. So instead of creating suits of armor, which is what Justin hired him for, he changed them to robots so he could infiltrate the system and use them against Tony. Robert Downey Jr. continued to shine as Tony Stark, bringing depth and charisma to his character. However, we get a glimpse of his weakness in the movie: alcohol. The movie takes slight influence from an Iron Man comic book arc called Devil in a Bottle, which showcases how his addiction affects him and the Iron Man persona. The film does an okay job of bringing this to life, but it's only used for a scene or two. Also, I'm pretty sure he's not drunk, it's just palladium poisoning from his old arc reactor. The film also introduced Mickey Rourke as his formidable villain, Ivan Vanko, who brought a gritty edge to the story. He manages to recreate the arc reactor from his home, as his father was involved with the creation of the first arc reactor. However, Howard Stark pulled Ivan Vanko's father from the project, leaving him penniless. This sets Ivan on a mission to destroy the Stark's reputation. This character wasn't developed well throughout the movie. Rewatching it reminded me of how Gore the God Butcher was interpreted in Thor: Love and Thunder. He had a basic reason for his actions, went on a very strange revenge plot, and was quite a forgettable character. As you could tell, Rhodey had been recast this time around. He's now portrayed by Don Cheadle. I've mentioned the behind the scenes drama before. Don Cheadle does bring a calm yet intense role to the movie. Some other supporting characters in the movie include Pepper Potts and Happy Hogan, played by returning stars Gwyneth Paltrow and Jon Favreau. Their presence in this movie doesn't really expand on their characters in any way, but there are some important instances with Tony and Pepper. Tony promotes her to the CEO of Stark Industries, and they gain more traction as a couple by the end of the film. I think they start officially dating in the Avengers. Like I mentioned earlier, we get a debut of Nick Fury and Black Widow in the movie, as Marvel start to intertwine stories and characters. Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson, is a good inclusion to this, however he doesn't get much play in it. I do feel like his small role is all he needed though. Just a glimpse at this specific character makes him mysterious, and keeping him as this secluded and distrustful person hints towards bigger backstories. It really builds the character. They do a very similar thing with Natasha Romanoff, although we get more action from her. The hallway scene will always be my favourite Black Widow moment. She's just as cryptic as Nick Fury, but she shows us her heroics and definitely sets us up for her return in the Avengers. Iron Man 2 played a crucial role in expanding the MCU, setting the stage for future films with its introduction of key characters and story arcs. The use of S.H.I.E.L.D. and it being a prominent figure in the movie suggests how crucial it is to the later movies, and how it will interestingly play a massive role in the films like the Avengers. I said I'd come back to the element that Tony discovers or creates in the movie, which is incredibly vibranium. I thought this was an amazing theory at first, but it actually confirms this in the Iron Man 2 novelization. This blew my mind. I had no idea about this before researching it for the video, although I suppose it makes sense. If Tony's dad knew about vibranium from his time with Captain America, then he would have been curious as to what that element is. See how they were just paving the way this early on? This is why Phase 1 is perfect. Okay, now it's time for the trivial section of the video. Let's start it off with a very well known one. The kid that is almost killed by the Justin Hammer droid in the final act is played by Jon Favreau's son, and was rumoured to be Peter Parker, which has now been canonised by Kevin Feige himself. Scarlett Johansson was so eager for the role that she dyed her hair red before she was even cast. Mickey Rourke was technologically illiterate, so the scenes with him on a computer were apparently the most challenging. Justin Hammer's factory was actually filmed in Elon Musk's SpaceX facility. Elon Musk is also seen in the restaurant in Monaco before the race. Stan Lee has his usual cameo, this time representing a similar look to Larry King. As I'm rating these movies as I go along, Iron Man 2 solidly lands in the B tier for me. It does have ambitious storytelling and entertaining action, yet it struggles to intrigue me when it comes to the villain, and it also has some narrative challenges. Iron Man 2 successfully built on the foundation laid by its predecessor, advancing both Tony Stark's character arc and the overarching MCU storyline. While not without its flaws, the film remains a pivotal entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, continuing to captivate audiences with its blend of action, humour, and character development. Thor was Marvel's first adventure into cosmic realms, bringing gods and otherworldly beings into the MCU. The film tackles themes of worthiness, family, and redemption, all while introducing audiences to the majestic realm of Asgard. Join me as I explore how Thor expanded the MCU far beyond Earth, setting the groundwork for future cosmic adventures, and introducing key characters that would shape the Marvel Universe for years to come. Thor's story takes place in two different worlds, the magical realm of Asgard and a small town in New Mexico on Earth. This setup helps show how Thor changes from a proud prince to a humble hero. The mix of these two places makes the movie more interesting to watch, with both big action scenes and more intimate moments between characters. Kenneth Branagh, who's known for his Shakespearean filmography, was chosen to direct Thor. This was a surprise, but it worked well. His experience with grand stories helped make Thor's world feel more important and real. Branagh also kept the humour and heart that people expect from Marvel movies. His knowledge of classic stories helped him bring this Norse mythology to life in a way that felt both big and relatable. The writers of Thor, Ashley Edward Miller, Zack Stentz, and Don Payne, had a tough job. They needed to explain a complicated mythological background whilst making sure the story was coherent. They did this by focusing on themes that everyone can relate to, like family and responsibility. These ideas were woven into both the Asgard and Earth parts of the story. This made the movie appealing to viewers, whether they knew about Marvel Comics or not. The way the movie is put together also deserves praise. The story, created by J. Michael Straczynski and Mark Protizovich, moves back and forth between big events in Asgard and more personal moments on Earth. This careful planning allows for both character growth and world building. It sets up not just Thor's personal story, but also the larger mythology that would be important in future Marvel movies. Thor's action scenes mix big space battles with regular fighting. The destruction of the Rainbow Bridge is especially cool to watch. It shows how the movie balances exciting visuals with character growth. Asgard, Thor's home, looks amazing. It has golden towers and a rainbow bridge that make it feel like another world. The design team mixed futuristic looks with old Norse ideas to create a place that feels both ancient and advanced. This unique look sets Asgard apart from other movie versions of mythical places and gave the cosmic part of Marvel movies its own style. Thor's powers, especially his lightning and hammer Mjolnir, look really cool on screen. When Thor gets his powers back on Earth and we get the lightning all around him and his hammer flying into his hand, it was an awesome sight. This scene uses both computer effects and real props to make Thor's abilities feel powerful and real. The costumes, especially for the Asgardians, look great. They take ideas from comic books but make them work in real life. Thor's armor and cape and Loki's horned helmet have become iconic within the MCU. The costumes have lots of small details that make the characters feel more real and magical. These designs respect the original comics and created a new look that influenced later Marvel films. Chris Hemsworth's portrayal of Thor is a standout element of the film. He brings a perfect blend of charm and arrogance to the role. Chris Hemsworth did a great job as Thor. He got in amazing shape for the role, looking like a real god while still being relatable. Tom Hiddleston's portrayal of Loki was undoubtedly one of the film's most compelling elements. As Thor's adopted brother and primary antagonist, Hiddleston brought a captivating depth to the character, significantly elevating the family drama. His performance perfectly captured Loki's complex nature. Hiddleston's ability to convey Loki's inner turmoil and conflicting motivations with such subtlety and skill made the character instantly memorable. This portrayal laid the foundation for Loki to become one of the most beloved characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with fans eagerly anticipating his every appearance. Natalie Portman played Jane Foster, bringing a human touch to the space story. As a scientist, Jane helped lay a more grounded view towards the magical parts of the story. Her relationship with Thor, albeit a bit lackluster, helped develop his understanding and perspective. Portman played Jane as smart and driven, different from the usual damsel in distress in superhero movies. Anthony Hopkins was great as Odin, Thor's father and king of Asgard. He made the mythical parts of the story feel real. Hopkins showed Odin as a strong leader who uses tough love on Thor, which is shown in the incredible scene when Odin banishes him. The supporting actors also did well. Stellan Skarsgård, played by Erik Selvig, a scientist who slowly starts to believe in Norse gods. Kat Dennings played Darcy Lewis, adding funny quips to balance out the serious parts. Their performances made the story more believable and enjoyable. Idris Elba played Heimdall, the guardian of the Rainbow Bridge. Even though he wasn't in the movie much, Elba's strong performance made Heimdall memorable and showed how sophisticated Asgard's society is. Thor helps expand the Marvel Cinematic Universe far beyond Earth. It shows viewers the 9 realms, which are different worlds interconnected with each other. Earth is one of these worlds, called Midgard. Asgard, Thor's home, is another. This opens up the MCU to more space adventures and new story possibilities. The movie also gives S.H.I.E.L.D. a bigger role. Agent Phil Coulson, played by Clark Gregg, has a substantial impact in the film. He carries on his story from the previous time we saw him in the Iron Man 2's post-credits scene. S.H.I.E.L.D. are fascinated by the landing of Thor's hammer and try to figure out what's happening, as they also get catapulted into this new cosmic adventure. We also get a subtle glance at Hawkeye, as he attempts to take down Thor when he breaks into the S.H.I.E.L.D.'s facility to take back his hammer. Thor's hammer Mjolnir brings the idea of worthiness to the MCU. Only people who are worthy can lift the hammer. This becomes an important idea in later Marvel movies. For example, in Avengers Age of Ultron, the heroes try to see who can lift the hammer. The scene after the credits is very important for future Marvel movies. It shows the Tesseract, a powerful object, and Nick Fury realizing that there are threats from space. This scene sets up important parts of the Avengers movie and later Thor movies. It's a good example of how these after credit scenes start becoming a teaser for the next film and hyping up the audience. Okay, it's time for some fun facts about the movie. Kenneth Branagh encouraged Anthony Hopkins to improvise during the banishment scene, adding some dramatic weight to the performance. The film's closing credits, inspired by Hubble telescope images, took an impressive 18 months to create. That really just shows the production team's commitment to the film. Branagh's childhood love for Thor comics influenced his directional approach. When Tom Hiddleston found out he had gotten the role, he was in a North London pub and screamed out loud, which then caused a bit of a commotion. And finally, Stan Lee's cameo appearance this time around has him driving a truck as he attempts to tow Thor's hammer from the crater. Okay, back to the rating segment now, and I'm gonna have to go with a B. I promise you, I'm not trying to play it safe. I know I've scored a B with the last lot of films, but they all just have a common gripe with me, and that's underutilizing supporting characters, and the fact that relationships in the movies feel very flat with little to no chemistry. Although it succeeded in creating a compelling origin story that blended mythology, science fiction, and human drama. Thor not only told a compelling standalone story, but also laid a crucial groundwork for the epic universe that would follow in the MCU. The introduction of the Nine Realms concept, the Bifrost, and powerful artifacts like Mjolnir and the Tesseract set the stage for future storylines. The film's exploration of themes such as worthiness, family, and the responsibilities of power would continue to echo throughout subsequent Marvel films, adding layers of depth to the overarching narrative of the MCU. Thor had a tough job, making a godlike character relatable. The movie did this well by focusing on Thor's personal growth and using great visuals. This made Thor an important part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Chris Hemsworth plays Thor perfectly, showing both his godly strength and his human side. This helped viewers connect with Thor emotionally. The other actors were good too, especially Tom Hiddleston as Loki. They added depth to the story and created relationships between characters that became important in later Marvel movies. However, some characters didn't get enough screen time, which made parts of the movie less interesting. Thor successfully expanded the MCU into cosmic realms, introducing audiences to new worlds and characters that would become integral in the later Marvel universe. The film's ambitious scope brought the mythical realm of Asgard to life, seamlessly blending Norse mythology with science fiction elements. This expansion not only enriched the MCU's universe, but also opened up possibilities for future cosmic adventures. Before the Avengers assembled, one star-spangled hero had to prove his worth. In a world not yet saturated with superheroes, Captain America the First Avenger faced the daunting task of making a World War II patriot relevant to a global 21st century audience. Join me as I explore how this origin story not only introduced a cornerstone of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but also delivered a thrilling adventure that still stands tall over a decade later. The structure of Captain America the First Avenger does a great job introducing this origin story. The film begins in the present day with the discovery of a frozen aircraft in the Arctic. We then flash back to 1942, following Steve Rogers' journey from a scrawny, determined guy to the super soldier Captain America. The screenplay, penned by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, does an excellent job of balancing character development with action set pieces. We spend a significant amount of time with pre-serum Steve, allowing us to connect with his moral compass and determination. This investment pays off when he finally becomes Captain America. One of the production's biggest challenges was creating a believable physical transformation for Steve Rogers. The visual effects team, led by Christopher Townsend, used a combination of CGI and practical effects to shrink Chris Evans down for his pre-serum scenes. This effect is crucial to the film's success, as it allows the audience to buy into Steve's journey, and it doesn't look completely outlandish. The action sequences in Captain America the First Avenger are a blend of practical stunts and CGI enhancements. From Steve's early days in basic training to the climatic battle aboard the Red Skull's aircraft, one standout sequence for me is where Captain America raids the Hydra base to rescue Bucky and the other prisoners. This scene truly demonstrates Steve's physical power while also highlighting his tactical mind. The visual effects in the film are generally strong, with a previous mentioned Skinny Steve being the particular triumph. The Red Skull's reveal is another effects highlight, with Hugo Weaving's performance enhanced by impressive prosthetics and CGI to create a truly menacing villain. The film's colour palette is also worth noting. It's a muted, slightly desaturated look that fits the period setting, while still allowing for moments of vibrant colour, particularly in Captain America's costume and shield, and the bright blue of the Tesseract. Alan Silvestri's score deserves a special mention, particularly the inspiring Captain America March. The music perfectly captures the heroic spirit of the character and the era, becoming an instant classic within the MCU soundtrack. Chris Evans' portrayal of Steve Rogers, Captain America, stands out as the cornerstone of this film, adding authenticity and heroism. Although Evans was initially hesitant to commit to the role due to the potential long-term implications of this career, he ultimately embraced the character with a dedication that shines through every scene. His performance strikes a delicate balance between earnestness and determination. Evans' portrayal is particularly impressive in how it seamlessly bridges Steve Rogers' physical transformation from a scrawny, determined guy to the pinnacle of human potential. This depiction of Steve's character serves as a reminder that Captain America's true strength doesn't lie in his enhanced abilities, but in his ethics and his willingness to stand up for what's right, no matter the odds. Haley Atwell's Peggy Carter is a standout performance, avoiding the typical love interest tropes to become a fully realised character in her own right. Her chemistry with Evans is memorable, making their short romance all the more moving. Her role as Peggy Carter has also gifted her multiple reappearances throughout the MCU, including her own series and multiversal counterparts. Sebastian Stan's portrayal of Bucky Barnes is crucial in establishing the foundation for future MCU storylines. Stan brings depth to the character, effectively conveying Bucky's loyalty and camaraderie with Steve. Their on-screen friendship feels authentic and lived in, built on a shared history that resonates throughout the film. This relationship adds some emotional weight to Bucky's apparent death, creating a moment that reverberates not only within this movie, but also sets the stage for developments in future MCU installments. Tommy Lee Jones brings his gruff charm to the role of Colonel Chester Phillips. His gradual shift from skepticism to respect for Steve is well played and satisfying. Hugo Weaving's portrayal of Johann Schmidt, Red Skull, is a masterclass in villainy. Weaving brings a perfect blend of menace and charisma to the role. His performance is genuine as it maintains that sense of threat. Schmidt's megalomania and twisted ideology are conveyed brilliantly throughout Weaving's performance. His delivery and imposing presence make every scene he's in full of tension. The reveal of Red Skull's true face is a standout moment, with Weaving's expressive eyes conveying the character's madness even beneath the impressive prosthetics. The supporting cast, including Dominic Cooper as Howard Stark, Toby Jones as Dr. Armin Zola, and Stanley Tucci as Dr. Erskine, all contribute depth and colour to the world of the film. Tucci in particular makes a strong impression in his limited screen time, creating a mentor whose influence on Steve resonates throughout the movie. As it's the fifth entry in the MCU, Captain America the First Avenger plays a crucial role in setting up future storylines and connections. The Tesseract, introduced here as Hydra's power source, becomes a major plot point in the Avengers and beyond. Later revealed as one of the 6 Infinity Stones, this cosmic artifact's presence in the 1940s establishes a theme that carries on through the MCU. Howard Stark's involvement provides a direct link to Tony Stark, Iron Man, enriching the backstory for both characters. This generational connection adds depth to the Stark's legacy and sets up future conflicts and revelations, particularly in Iron Man 2 and Captain America Civil War. The film's epilogue, set in modern-day New York, directly leads into the Avengers, with Nick Fury recruiting Cap for the initiative. This seamless transition bridges the gap between Cap's 1940s origins and his role in the Avengers team. The introduction of Hydra as a threat extends beyond this film, playing a major role in Captain America the Winter Soldier and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. This establishes a long-running antagonist that weaves into multiple corners of the MCU. Bucky's fall from the train sets up his return as the Winter Soldier, a plotline that would drive much of the Captain America trilogy. This seemingly minor event in the first Avenger becomes a catalyst for one of the most compelling character arcs in the entire MCU. These connections really show Marvel's commitment to building a cohesive universe. Let's crack on with some interesting tidbits about Captain America the First Avenger. Like I mentioned earlier, Chris Evans initially turned down the role multiple times before finally accepting, concerned about the long-term contract and potential typecasting. The USO performance scene featuring the Star Spangled Man song was filmed in one continuous shot. The film's working title was Frostbite, a clever nod to Cap's eventual fate. Joe Johnston's experience working on the Raiders of the Lost Ark as a visual effects artist influenced the film's 1940s adventure tone. The vintage cars used in the film were worth over $85 million in total. including a rare Bentley owned by Howard Stark. And lastly, Stan Lee's cameo in this film occurs during the scene where Captain America is supposed to receive a medal from a US senator. Lee plays the general in the audience who initially mistakes another man for Steve Rogers. In my ongoing ranking of the MCU films, Captain America the First Avenger earns a solid A tier placement. While it may not reach the heights of some later MCU entries, it succeeds admirably in establishing Captain America as a compelling character and setting the stage for future adventures. Its period setting and strong performances make it a standout in the early phases of the MCU. Captain America the First Avenger faced the daunting task of introducing a potentially outdated superhero to modern audiences, and it succeeded with flying colours. The film's strengths lie in its compelling origin story that truly emphasises character over spectacle, strong performances particularly from Chris Evans and Hayley Atwell, skillful integration of the 1940s period elements with superhero action, effective world building that expands the MCU, and explorations of heroism, sacrifice and determination. While some critics at the time felt the film was merely a step up for the Avengers, Captain America the First Avenger stands well as an entertaining adventure that I always look forward to rewatching. It also successfully translates a unique American icon to the big screen. The film's emphasis on Steve Rogers' character, his unwavering moral compass and willingness to sacrifice for others, established Captain America as the heart of the Avengers and a backbone of the MCU for years to come. In 2012, Marvel Studios released the movie The Avengers, a culmination of their previous films featuring iconic superheroes such as Iron Man and Captain America. This movie went on to open with $207 million. It broke box office records and grossed over $1.5 billion worldwide. So yeah, this movie was massive and obviously it really helped kick the MCU into fifth gear. Join me as I look into this historical cinematic event and how its use of themes like teamwork and trust shaped how the Avengers were depicted in their first ever film. So the movie follows your average 3-tier structure. Act 1 begins with Loki stealing the Tesseract from S.H.I.E.L.D. and sets up his rise as the main villain. Nick Fury then works to assemble the team, introducing different heroes and establishing their individual personalities and conflicts. Act 2 focuses on the team's internal struggles and disagreements while on board the helicarrier. The heroes begin to overcome their differences as they learn to work together, especially after Loki's attack causes the death of Agent Coulson. Act 3 culminates in the Battle of New York, where the now united Avengers work as a team to stop Loki and the Chitauri invasion. This final act does a great job in showcasing each hero's abilities and some interesting choreography. The production itself took several months of filming, mostly in New Mexico and Cleveland, with extensive post-production work for the visual effects. The action sequences in The Avengers are well crafted as the film's visual artists combine practical effects with CGI, similar to the rest of the Phase 1 movies. This can be quite evident in scenes featuring the Hulk and the alien Chitauri army. Each major action set piece is distinct and memorable, from the forest fight between Thor, Iron Man and Captain America to the attack on the helicarrier. The standout is undoubtedly the Battle of New York, which lasts nearly 30 minutes and uses dynamic camera work, following the heroes as they fight together throughout the city. Whedon's direction stands out in how he frames these sequences, using wide shots to show scale and following shots to maintain the focus on the action. The film's colour palette is vibrant and comic book inspired. Particularly impressive is the film's ability to handle multiple heroes in single shots, creating iconic moments like the circular shot of the team assembling in New York. The visual effects hold up incredibly well, especially the transitions between practical and digital elements during the Iron Man suit-up sequences. The film features an incredible cast that brings Marvel's iconic heroes to life. Robert Downey Jr. returns as Tony Stark, Iron Man, bringing his signature wit and charisma. Chris Evans continues to embody the noble spirit of Steve Rogers, Captain America, while Chris Hemsworth captures Thor's godly physique and humility. One massive change to the Phase 1 characters was Mark Ruffalo's debut as Bruce Banner, the Hulk, offering a fresh take on the character's internal struggle. Scarlett Johansson and Jeremy Renner round out the team as Black Widow and Hawkeye, proving that even heroes without superpowers can hold their own. Tom Hiddleston's Loki serves as a gripping antagonist, whose motivations and theatrical presence really drives the conflict between him and the Avengers. The supporting cast includes Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, Clark Gregg as Agent Coulson, and Kobe Smulders as Maria Hill, who help ground the story in a more realistic way. What makes the cast work so well is their chemistry together. The interactions between characters feels natural, whether they're fighting alongside each other or butting heads. Each actor brings something unique to the role while still maintaining their comic book characteristic. The Avengers serves as the culmination of Phase 1 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, tying together plot threads and character arcs from previous films. The Tesseract, first introduced in Captain America the First Avenger, becomes central to the plot. Tony Stark's relationship with S.H.I.E.L.D., established in Iron Man 2, continues to develop. The film also plants seeds for future MCU installments. The post-credits scene introduces Thanos, setting up the larger cosmic threat that would eventually culminate in Infinity War and Endgame. Loki's character development here significantly influences his future in later Thor films and his own series. References to previous films are seamlessly integrated, from Captain America's adjustment to modern times, to Thor's complicated relationship with his brother. Some of the trivia for this movie is actually quite interesting, and some of it I didn't even know. The famous shawarma scene in the post-credits was filmed after the movie's premiere. Robert Downey Jr. suggested the idea and the cast reconvened to shoot it. The original script had Loki controlling the Hulk instead of Hawkeye, but this was changed during development to give Hawkeye a more significant role in the story. The film's iconic 360-degree shot of the team assembling during the Battle of New York took several weeks to plan and execute, combining both practical and visual effects. The film's massive battle sequences required extensive visual effects work, with over 2,200 VFX shots completed for the film. More than Iron Man 1 and 2, Thor, and Captain America the First Avenger combined. The movie's success led to Disney paying significant bonuses to the cast, with Robert Downey Jr. reportedly earning over $50 million for the role. For my rating of the Avengers, it deserved to be placed in the A tier alongside Captain America the First Avenger. I was going to put it higher, but the sequels like Infinity War topped the storytelling and the dynamic between characters. The fact that it set the standard for how team-up superhero movies should be executed and proved that the MCU's interconnected storytelling could work on a larger scale is some of the many reasons why the film is placed here. In conclusion, The Avengers stands as a landmark achievement in superhero filmmaking. It successfully brought together multiple franchise heroes into a structured, entertaining story. The movie's blend of spectacular action, character development, and humour proved that the ambitious crossover events could work on the big screen. Beyond its commercial success, the film's lasting impact on popular culture and the superhero genre can't be overstated. It demonstrated that comic book movies could be both critically and commercially successful while staying true to their source material. The Avengers not only concluded Phase 1 of the MCU perfectly, but also laid the groundwork for the franchise's future success.